Hi everyone, to episode 94 of The Art of Business English. Today, working here from home, got my little home studio set up, and I thought I'd just put together another episode for you guys. So basically what we're going to be looking at today in episode 94 is some formal and informal expressions that you can use for opening a meeting. So that's what we'll be covering. It's a little bit of a progression from the theme of the last couple of weeks where we're looking at meetings. So last week we looked at some further tips for preparing for a meeting. The week before that, I had the interview with my brother-in-law who was over from Australia. We looked at how to prepare a meeting quite in detail. So we didn't really cover in those episodes any language. So I thought today, to help with those of you who are trying to improve their English, that I'd give you some expressions that you can start to use for opening a meeting, both formally and informally. Obviously, formally we would be referring to meetings that are important that we're having with external customers or with key stakeholders. And maybe more informally would be an internal meeting with your colleagues where it's less important to use this formal language. So let's have a look at the outline for today. So we're going to look at the first part, which is small talk before a meeting. Now, it's not really related to opening a meeting, but it really is an essential part of meetings. Well, why? Because basically, when we receive anyone in a meeting, there's usually some people who arrive early, some people who arrive a bit later. So you could be there at the beginning of the meeting, either with your colleagues or with the customers, so depending on what type of meeting it is. You could be there and it might, there might be like 5, maybe even 10 minutes before the meeting actually starts. And it's really important that, especially if you've got external parties or external customers coming, because those 5 minutes can be really good and productive or really uncomfortable, especially if you don't really know what to say. So with that being said, it's really important to be able to engage in some small talk at the beginning of any meeting. Sometimes we're nervous, especially if we know the meeting's in English and English is not our first language. We can really feel a bit nervous and we're like, well, I don't know what to say. So that nervousness can be overcome very quickly by engaging in a little bit of small talk. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at then for today's episode is how to engage people in small talk. Obviously, I'll do both formal questions that you can ask and informal questions that you can ask. You'll see the change in language. Informal, the language is a little more relaxed. Maybe when we're talking informally, we already know the person. Whereas if we're talking more formally, we either don't know them or we don't know them very well. Okay, because maybe they're an external customer, you've only spoken to them on the phone. Maybe they're a potential customer and you really have never met them before. This could be the first meeting. So the language needs to be adjusted basically depending on who you're talking to. So let's take a look then at small talk with someone you know. So this is probably an internal meeting or someone that you have a good relationship with. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you, if you're watching the video on YouTube, you can check out the table of all the expressions. You can also have a look at the table over at The Art of Business English. But if you're on the podcast, I'm going to run through those now. So you can just start with something simple like, how are you? How are you today? How have you been? Okay, using the present perfect, how have you been? How are things? Okay, it's really easy, really general questions people can easily answer. Another thing, now this all depends on what is happening in the city. So for example, I hear the Sydney Film Festival is on. So if you know the Sydney Film Festival is on, you could use that as a talking point, okay? Are you going to the Sydney Film Festival? Have you been to the Sydney Film Festival before? So all of these, you can just change Sydney Film Festival for whatever event it is that you're talking about. How was your holiday or how was your vacation? Again, depending on the context. How was your flight or how was your journey? You could ask that to someone who you maybe are receiving, you know them, and you're asking them how their flight was, but maybe they are someone you know, even though they've come in on business. How was the beach? Maybe you know someone went to the beach. Another thing is, how was the meeting? Maybe there was a previous meeting, whatever. Did the meeting go well? You're talking about maybe a meeting that your colleague had with another customer or client. Are you watching the Olympics or are you watching the World Cup? For example, this episode's being recorded in November of 2019 and the Rugby World Cup finished. Congratulations to the Springboks. But you could ask about the Rugby World Cup. So all of these are really contextual, okay? Are you keeping up with the Olympics or are you keeping up with the World Cup or are you keeping up with the football? Keeping up with means are you following it? Are you interested in the cricket? Are you interested in baseball? Are you interested in football? How was the weekend? Are you keeping up with, again, we're using this phrasal verb to keep up with, so to be up to date, no? Are you keeping up with it? And then you can insert a current world event. So that basically means, what world event, whatever it is. Are you keeping up with the election? How's the family, if you know the person has a family? How's the insert name project coming along? So if you know your colleague's working on a project, you could say, how is this project coming along? And what is the latest in, and then insert the name of the city or town where that person lives. And then did you hear about, and then you can insert an event. So did you hear about, and then, the storm or the cyclone, okay? And what about, and then insert an event or a person's name. So what about John? How's he doing? So you can refer to other people. So those are some really simple questions you can ask at the beginning of a meeting just to have a little bit of small talk, get people feeling comfortable. Let's look then at small talk with someone you do not know. So in this case, this could be someone that you don't know or someone that you don't know very well. Okay, they could be a customer, they could be someone that you've just met. So we need to change our language. So again, I'm going to run through those. You could say, how are you? How are you today? How are you doing or how are you going? Those are fine. How are you finding Sydney? So, asking if it's their first time, maybe they're here on business. Is this your first time to Sydney? Did you know the Sydney Film Festival is on? So you can insert an event. Have you been to the Sydney Film Festival before? How was your flight? So if you know they came in on a flight for business, you could say, how was your flight? Have you seen much of Sydney yet? So again, you asking them about the city, maybe recommendations. Are you enjoying your stay at the hotel? If you know that if your company's arranged a hotel for them, you could ask about that. Would you be interested in going to the Sydney Film Festival? Maybe your company can get tickets to certain events, so you can offer those tickets. That's a great way to get people feeling comfortable. Are you interested in the cricket, the football, the baseball, whatever sport it is? Can I offer you some recommendations on places to eat? So that's a nice thing to do. People always like to go to nice restaurants when they're on business. Are you watching the Olympics or the World Cup? You can also say, keeping up with, so you can also talk about world events. So are you keeping up with the rugby? I'm told you're from Wales. What's it like this time of year? So if you know where the person's from, you could ask them about what their city's like or how their village is or what it's like at this time of year. It's cold, maybe it's lovely weather. Have anything? You are in Sydney, so you're asking them about things maybe they want to see, and then you can follow up with some advice. Yeah, well, I recommend you try this. You could do that. Okay, so those are really good ways to get people feeling comfortable before a meeting, especially if you don't know them. Okay, so remember the golden rule, especially with people you don't really know well: stay away from politics, stay away from religion, stay away from any controversial topics. You don't want to go and start talking about politics or something that's a bit controversial. You just want to keep the topics nice and light, easy to answer. Okay, let's move on then. So we're going to look now at use when opening. What I've done is I've divided them into different sections. So we're going to start with opening the meeting. First is I would like to get started. So you're using would, which is would like, which is much more formal and polite than I want to. Another one you could use is I've called in order to discuss. So in order to is much more formal than just saying to discuss. Means the same thing though. And the next one is, this meeting has been called with the aim of. So again, you've called a meeting, the aim of. This language is much more formal than saying I've arranged this meeting so we can talk about. Okay, but we're going to look at informal expressions in a moment. The next topic area is welcoming participants. So we could say, it's a pleasure to welcome Jane Rivers. So it's a pleasure. That's a nice way to welcome someone. The next one is, we are honoured to have Jane Rivers with us today. So that's a really formal way to welcome someone to your company or to a meeting. And please join me in offering a warm welcome to Jane Rivers. Okay, so you're encouraging everyone in the meeting to welcome Jane Rivers to this meeting in a warm way. So that's a really great and very formal way to welcome participants. The next one is referring to the agenda. So the first expression you could use is, I trust you all have a copy of the agenda. Okay, that's a nice one. Today, our aim is to cover the following agenda items. So again, using aim, okay, and the following agenda items is much more formal. And then, as you will see, or as you will all see, the agenda has 4 main items to be covered today. Now, to be covered today is a bit passive-y, so it sounds much more formal. Okay, remember, the passive voice is much more formal than the active voice. Okay, and another one, this meeting has been called, again, the passive, to discuss the following agenda items. So those are formal expressions that you can use for referring to the agenda. Let's look then at referring to timing. Okay, remember, timing is very important with meetings. We don't want to be wasting time. We want to keep our meetings on point and highly focused. So the first one would be, I would like to keep the meeting to 1 hour. So would like is better than want. And to respect everyone's time, this meeting will last for 60 minutes. Okay, so that's important. Then I would appreciate it if everyone could keep their contributions short and concise in order to finish the meeting on time. Okay, so appreciate, this is very formal language, concise, in order to, as opposed to just using to. Okay, so that's great. Those are some expressions for referring to timing. And then finally, handing over to other participants. Let's look at that one. Mary, would you be so kind to lead with the first item on the agenda? Okay, would you be so kind? That's very, very formal, very polite. The next one is, Mike, the floor is yours in order to open the meeting. Mike, the floor is yours in order to open the first item of today's meeting. Okay, so again, the floor is yours. That's very, very, very formal. And another one, John, it would be a pleasure hearing from you first. Okay, so that's really nice and really formal. Okay, so it will be a pleasure hearing from you first. Okay, so now that we've discussed the formal expressions for opening a meeting, let's look at informal expressions. Now, again, these expressions are going to be following exactly the same structure, but we're just modifying the expressions. So first one is opening the meeting. You could say something like, let's get started. Okay, let's is the imperative, and it's for nosotros, or we, so let's get started. If everyone is here, we can start the meeting. Again, we can is like less formal than we could or may we. Thanks everyone for coming. Let's kick things off. Remember, to kick off is an informal way to start something. We often have a kick off in a meeting. Welcoming participants, we can say, thanks for attending, Jane. So that's quite thanks as opposed to thank you very much. Can everyone join me in welcoming Jane Rivers? Okay, so can, less formal, welcoming, so not quite as formal as before. And it's great to have Jane joining us today. So that's that's quite informal. All right, let's move on to referring to the agenda now. And has everyone got a copy of the agenda? So yeah, quite informal there. There are 4 points on the agenda for today. I want to get through the following 4 items on the agenda today. I called this meeting to get your views on the 3 points listed on the agenda. Okay? Right. Let's take a look at referring to timing. So the first one is, let's keep this meeting to 1 hour. Again, we're using let's, so it's quite, imperative. Today's meeting should only take an hour. Can I get everyone to keep their discussion points to 5 minutes? So you're asking a question with can. And handing over to other participants. So these are the last points here for informal expressions. The first one, Mary, can you kick things off? Again, using this expression, kick off or kick things off, that's informal. And Mike, it'd be great if you could jump in and take the floor. So jump in, phrasal verb, very informal. And finally, John, can we hear from you first? So, these are very different. No? You can see from the original one, which was much more formal. Okay, so that really is it for opening a meeting. Those are my thoughts, and these are my final thoughts. So, I really appreciate that sometimes, leading a meeting in English and opening an English meeting in English can be daunting. It can be a bit nerve-wracking. You may feel nervous and a bit uncomfortable because you're not sure about how effective your English skills will be, but it's really important not to worry because, with a bit of small talk at the beginning and then having these really fixed expressions to open and lead the meeting, you just get things moving. You just get the ball rolling and the meeting underway, and then, things start to fall into place. People take on their role, and you as the person who's leading the meeting can then just direct and keep people on point, make sure people are staying focused on the agenda and making sure you get your way through those agenda items without going off on a tangent. Okay, so that's really important. I mean, I really think that if you follow some of these ideas and you use some of these expressions, you should be pretty comfortable in opening a meeting. Remember, opening a meeting should only take about 2 or 3 minutes. You just need to, do a bit of small talk, welcome the participants, and introduce the agenda items, and then talk about timing, and then hand over to whoever's going to be leading with the first point. Okay, so that is it from me. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. As always, it's been a pleasure. Let me know in the comments what you guys think is the best expression, or let me know if there are expressions that you use when you like to open or when you're opening a meeting. And yeah, if you have any questions regarding any of those points or some of the language, then yeah, drop a comment. I'm more than happy to explain them for you. Okay, well that's it from me here at The Art of Business English. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you all next week for another episode of The Art of Business English. Take care. Bye for now.